Hi folks, we're here today and I'm here to talk about resilience and how to name the kind of very specific support you need to bounce back. Because when we talk about this idea of resilience, whether it's building up parenting resilience or personal resilience, whatever it might be, what we're really talking about is the ability to bounce back, right? So resilience simply means that you can handle certain things or you can manage certain things, but then you have the ability to take them on and then bounce back to either a normal stasis point or just a point of contentment or a point of normalcy. So this idea of having resilience, sometimes we can take that to mean that I have to be resilient means I have to take everything on and hold on to it all the time. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about knowing where your limits are, and when you get close to those limits, knowing what you need to do to actually bounce back. So there are really four kind of big categories I've run into, at least talking to lots of other parents and working with other parents, in terms of the type of recovery that folks find most helpful when it comes to building that resilience and building in that space to bounce back. And it's interesting because, I think in sort of the self-care world, especially that I've encountered online, there's a lot of talk about self-care being, sometimes it's like manicures and pedicures, and there's another side of the self-care world. It's like, no, it's exercise, or whatever it is. And so I think that what's more important than what activity you do to bounce back is to just name what the need is. So here are the four major categories that I've found in working with people. The first one is what people need is alone time. And this is especially true for parents, especially true for parents of young children. This is also especially true for people who work in professions or do other work that's around a lot of people. So sometimes what you need is when you're kind of overwhelmed or overstimulated, or you're over asked for juice boxes, or you're over touched by all the people in your life, what you really need to bounce back is just some alone time. That alone time can take lots of forms. It can be a walk. It can be going and sitting in a coffee shop by yourself. It could be going and hiding upstairs or hiding in a different room in your home, right? But if you can name for yourself that what you need to bounce back is alone time, you then can choose what kind of alone time you have. And some of it will be dependent on your situation, and some of it will be dependent on what you like. I know plenty of people who really they consider their alone time to go get a manicure or go do something like that. That is not me. I don't enjoy that. So I just put that out there to say you should do what you enjoy, not what you think you should enjoy. All right, so category one was alone time. Category two is some kind of community support or time with other people. And this is that kind of thing where you're finding that you actually maybe feel isolated, especially if you're a new parent. I remember feeling this way very intensely as a new parent, where I was actually hanging in there okay, but I just felt so isolated and so unsure of myself. And I would go to stores just so I could talk to cashiers. And if that's you, you're probably in a situation where your bounce back need is to be with other people. Maybe that means scheduling a time to meet up with a friend for coffee, or calling a friend who lives out of state. Or maybe it means actually making plans to join a book club or meet people for dinner, or to, if a friend actually invites you to a party, even if it's inconvenient, you still make it happen, right? So recognize that if you're feeling isolated or feeling alone, maybe the thing you need to bounce back is actually some time with other people. Maybe the same people in your family, and maybe outside your family. But just sort of acknowledging that, oh, if I'm feeling isolated and alone, this is what I need, that sort of community support. The third major category is physical rest. So often, we talk about things like, oh, you need to make time for self-care. You need to do all these things to take care of yourself. When fundamentally, the number one thing most of us need is more sleep. Let's be real. As, at different phases of our life, we'll need it more than others. But the truth is that sometimes the best thing you can do to bounce back is to just get sleep. And sometimes that does mean the whole nap when you can thing, especially when you're a new parent. But I also want to encourage folks to think about what would it look like to get better quality sleep. And I have a couple of friends I was talking to recently where one of them has a newborn. And when the baby, I guess the baby was about 3 months old, 4 months old, she was really having trouble sleeping. Obviously, she'd been getting up with the baby. So she actually was able to go, she spent the night in a hotel room just to get a solid night's sleep without being woken up at all. And so I share that, again, it may or may not be something you would do, but to recognize that you don't have to go do 15 things that are self-care things. If what you need is physical rest, it might mean getting more sleep. It might mean trying things to sleep better, or it could just mean letting yourself sit and relax and close your eyes, even if you don't sleep, rather than trying to go do something. And then the fourth major category that I find helps that people need when they're trying to bounce back, when they're feeling their resilience is low, is some kind of mental rest. And I will say, I think that I want to be careful with this word rest here, because mental rest doesn't necessarily mean that you're meditating or doing something stationary. And I say that as somebody who's tried meditating. I find it really beneficial. It's still something I struggle with. It's not the place that I go to get mental rest. Instead, for me, mental rest is reading a book, especially a book that's a little bit light and fluffy, or going to some kind of workout class where there's somebody telling me what to do so that all my focus and mental energy is on what's in front of me. Really, any kind of mental rest is something that gets you out of whatever mental cycles you're in the middle of, especially if you've got wheels spinning. So mental rest could be going to a yoga class or meditating, but mental rest could also just be going and watching a movie that you know and love and don't have to think too much about. Or mental rest could be reading a book. Or mental rest could be, again, going to some kind of class or workshop where you're going to be immersed in something that's not your normal life. And that's a little bit of a break for your brain, even if it's engaged in a new thing. So when we talk about how to build resilience or how to bounce back, we always have to start with naming what kind of bounce back do we need. And just to reiterate, the four major categories that I find working with folks is we either need alone time, or we need time with community or other people, or we need physical rest, or we need mental rest. And sometimes we need all four at once, and it's a matter of saying which one's going to help me get the biggest bounce back right now. And maybe even though you really are feeling isolated and you need some community time, getting more sleep that night is going to give you the biggest sort of bounce back factor. You go for it. Because the truth is, creating balance is always about making these intentional choices about what matters most and what can have the most impact with the time and energy we have. So thank you so much for watching. I do encourage you to check out createbalancedlife.com for more resources. And also, if you want to follow along, my newsletter is the best way to keep up with us. Thank you so much for watching.